Welcome to the second video in our series where we're exploring the book of Proverbs and the Cardinal Virtues. So in our previous video, we talked about how both of these ancient traditions have the idea that human beings are composed of at least two different components. We have an interior component of our life and an exterior component, right? And both saw the interior as being uniquely important. So before we move on and talk about the specific virtues and what Proverbs has to say about them, I thought it would be helpful to look a little more closely at this idea of the inner life as these two traditions understand it. And so for the first, I thought I'd look at the book of Proverbs in chapter 4, where we read the following: "Above all else, guard your heart, for from it flow the springs of life." All right, so there's this advice that we ought to guard our hearts. And keep in mind that when the Hebrews talk about the heart, they're not talking, as we often do, about simply the seat of affection or romantic feelings. Rather, this is the entire inner life that includes feelings, but also thought. So as the Hebrew scholar Robert Alter has put it, for the Hebrews, the heart is the seat of understanding or conscious intellection. Now, when we talk about the book of Proverbs and compare it to the Cardinal Virtues, one of the challenges that we come up against is that the book of Proverbs is part of a canon. So we can look at these 31 verses, or rather these 31 chapters of the book of Proverbs, and know pretty well what we're talking about. The Cardinal Virtues, on the other hand, are this tradition that spanned millennia. And so there's not one authoritative text that we can look at. Nevertheless, there's some agreement across the tradition. And I think C.S. Lewis put it well in his popular book, Mere Christianity, as he was discussing the virtues and how they work. Here's what he said. He said, "There's a difference between doing some particular just or temperate action and being a just or temperate man. Someone who's not a good tennis player may now and then make a good shot. What you mean by a good player is a man whose eye and muscles and nerves have been so trained by making innumerable good shots that they can now be relied on. They have a certain tone or quality which is there even when he is not playing. In the same way, a man who perseveres in doing just actions gets in the end a certain quality of character. Now it is that quality, rather than the particular actions, which we mean when we talk of a virtue." So I think what Lewis is saying here with his example of the tennis player is very similar to what the book of Proverbs is talking about. That in both of them, there's this inner life and there's this quality, and it needs to be paid attention to for its own sake, but also because actions flow from it, right? The character and the habits that are built up in this tennis player show up in the kind of tennis that he plays. And similarly in Proverbs, the kind of heart that you cultivate affects the actions that you take. And so again, for both the Proverbs and the Cardinal Virtues, this inner life matters a great deal, and it matters because the things that you do are going to flow from it. Now, as I mentioned, I look forward to, in the coming videos, to look at these specific virtues. The first one coming up is wisdom, and this is the chief virtue for the Cardinal Virtues, and it's a matter of extreme importance for the book of Proverbs. So I hope you'll stick with me for those. Thanks very much.
I have seen